You're listening to HR Leader, inspiring you to lead the workforce of tomorrow.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the HR Leader podcast. My name's Jerome Doraisamy. I'm coming to you today from Camaragal Land in Sydney, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Tim Hewson, who is the founder of Mongrels Men and Betterment Consulting. He's also a self-described manbassador. Tim, welcome to the show.
Jerome, thanks for having me.
We're having this conversation in the lead-up to International Men's Day, and today we're going to be discussing some of the unique and idiosyncratic wellness challenges that males will face in the workplace, what kind of impact that all has, and what needs to be done in order to cater to some of those specific wellness needs that men will face. Tim, there's a lot to cover here, but before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
A little bit about me. Okay, so I've spent about 27 years in banking and finance up until about 2 years ago. For almost 20 of those years, I lived with a lot of fear, shame, embarrassment, and a bucket load of ignorance about what was at the time my very poor mental health challenges. That evolved from, teenaged anxiety and paranoia, which I thought was a normal level, into anxiety in my early 20s, through to my late 20s where I was having panic attacks every single day. It was how I started my day, locking myself in the bathroom cubicle, strapping myself in, holding my hands against the walls, believing that if I pressed hard enough that I could ride out the pure tidal wave of panic and that eventually everything would be okay. Roll the clock forward into my 30s and having done nothing about that teenage angst, worry, paranoia, the daily panic attacks, it evolved into what was later determined as being depression. And so for 20 years I put the suit and tie on. I went to work. I did what I thought I was meant to do, work hard and provide and love for my family. And, it didn't make any sense to me what was happening at the time. This idea of, looking at myself in the mirror, the guy I saw staring back at me was a guy that I thought that I was always meant to be. I worked hard, provided for my family, I wore a suit and tie. And, almost 20 years of living with that fear, shame, embarrassment kind of came to a conclusion in about 2016, going through separation and divorce. It was probably the kick in the pants that I kind of really needed to shift from this, well-worn path of manning up, soldiering on, burying my head and myself in work, thinking that I could just solve the challenges myself, pretending that everything was okay, when really it wasn't, and it was now becoming obvious that I couldn't. So that was kind of the start of, my process of getting professional help and support, reaching out, finding new ways to connect with other blokes. And it wasn't always me. Sometimes it was me reaching out to them. Roll the clock forward. Those community groups that were started became a charity and has now been a charity for the last 4 years. And I left corporate, as I said, 2 years ago, and I'm now out working with corporates and communities to create mentally healthier human beings, workplaces and communities.
Yeah. Well, Tim, firstly, I want to thank you for sharing all of that. I really appreciate that, and I've no doubt some of our listeners will as well. I also want to say that I'm very sorry that you did go through that, starting as a teenager, and having experienced anxiety and depression myself, I have some level of understanding for what you will have gone through, and it's certainly something that I've always felt nobody should ever have to experience. So I am very sorry to you for all of that. Could I ask, because you spoke about all of that with real fluency, as if you have told that story a million times, and maybe you have. And I wanted to ask how long it took you to get comfortable vocalizing those thoughts, those feelings, those experiences. Because for me, that took a little while.
Yeah, the fluency comes with the idea of, and you mentioned it in the introduction, me being a manbassador. If I can't tell my story, if I can't share my experience with the benefit of that potentially helping somebody, then I'm kind of in the wrong gig. Almost 20 years of living with that fear, shame, embarrassment, of sucking it up and soldiering on was mostly in silence, right? So, the idea of opening up for the first time through professional help and support was actually really, really hard. It was really, really uncomfortable, and not just physically or mentally and emotionally, like physically. I could feel it in my body. I remember the first time I actually opened up and told my story, and it wasn't as fluent as that, but it was real, in an industry event where I was actually for the first time surrounded by my colleagues, my peers, my clients, my partners, the people that worked with me and for me. And that was a big moment, but that was less than 6 years ago. So it's a story that is mine. It's always been there, but it's evolved, and I suppose ultimately I've got better at being able to communicate what that was.
Yeah. So I said a little earlier that it took me a while to get comfortable talking about it, and what I mean by that is that it took me a while to even acknowledge the issues within myself. I was ignorant or naive to what I was experiencing, and that was ultimately my downfall. I then, however, became pretty quickly comfortable talking about it, or maybe comfortable is the wrong word, but I realized either I had to, because I felt like if I didn't talk about it, if I didn't take control over that situation, then it would control me. I come from a legal background. You come from a banking and finance background. Crudely speaking, both rather traditional conservative industries relative to others. How difficult was it for you to talk about your experiences in that professional context? Because that was certainly something that worried me, being in the legal profession, even though I felt like I needed to do that.
Yeah, if I think back to when I was experiencing daily panic attacks, the thoughts that were going through my mind were, I cannot talk to anybody at this. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand it. I don't even know where to start to explain it to somebody else. And although I had what I'd consider to be a supportive boss at the time, there was no way I could have this conversation with them, and it was the fear of what everybody else thought, not just what I was thinking, but we're also talking 25 odd years ago, and the fear was, and it was real for me, was they'll strap me up in a white jacket and take me away. Things have evolved and changed a lot since then. The idea of being able to open up and have those conversations in the workplace. But there's still a massive amount of stigma that's being faced.
Oh, absolutely. And why is it so important for you personally and professionally to tell your story and then to work with professionals across the board as a manbassador? What is it about this kind of work that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, for the first time in my life, I actually think and believe I am doing what I'm meant to be doing, and it's taking me almost 50 odd years to try and figure that out. It's important for me because increasingly I see that not only do I need this and I get the benefit of it, but I see the impact that it has on others and those around me. And one of the catalysts for me jumping in and wanting to do something in the community initially was the idea of, well, if it impacts me and I'm starting to see it impact those around me more so because my eyes have been, my eyes have been opened. When I looked at the statistics around men's health, men's mental health and well-being, I was kind of shocked, right? Like I was mostly ignorant to how big the challenge and the problem was. And so, I selfishly do it for me because I need it. But I also know that it's having a positive impact on so many other men, whether it's the communities in the charity, the workplaces that I walk into, or the friendships, the family or the communities that I'm in. And also selfishly, it makes me feel good. But I know it's needed. So if I can make a change, then I will.
We're chatting with Tim Hewson, and we'll be back with more right after this. So, Tim, you started to allude there to some of the stats around men's mental health, and I thought that might be a good segue into talking about the unique challenges that are facing men, not just in the workplace, but more broadly as well. There's obviously a lot more talk about wellness these days, which is fantastic. We don't talk as much about some of the specific gendered considerations. Tell us a bit more about the challenges and hurdles that men are facing in particular.
Yeah, we know that 50% of Australians, and 50% of Australians are male, will experience a mental health challenge at some point in their lifetime. We know how prevalent anxiety and depression are amongst Australians, with 1 in 4 experiencing or likely to experience anxiety and 1 in 7 depression. But the rubber hits the road when we see Australians start to take their life and die by suicide. And so we lose 9 Australians every single day. 7 of those that we lose every single day are Australian men, which means that 75% of the lives lost are Aussie blokes. And that number itself is double the national road toll. As a contributor to male premature deaths, suicide is one of the leading causes, and it's the leading cause of death for men between the ages of 15 to 44. Broaden that out to health and wellbeing. We know that 50% of Aussie blokes don't do enough exercise, and we also know how important something like exercise and movement is for our mental health. We die 6 years younger than women on average, and we're not very good at asking for help, reaching out for support, or even going to the GP. And for those that do reach out for professional help and support, in this case mental health and support, which is only 1 in 4 Aussie blokes who need it, 75% of them don't see their therapy through to the end. So it's not just a case of not doing something about it. We're not seeing it through, and we're not reaching out, we're not asking for help and support. So we need to tackle that challenge.
Are there specific professional or workplace challenges that serve to exacerbate some of these issues that men are facing across the board? I mean, certainly, you were just detailing some of the societal considerations, but is there anything about working life and in some cases for men, sorry, I'll start that again. But is there anything about working life that is compounding the problem that men are facing?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here that you've touched on. So when you think about the type of work that's done, we know that there are particular industries which are more susceptible to suicide and mental health challenges. Construction is a really good example. They are 3 or 4 of the 7 that we lose every single day. We mentioned legal and banking and finance, again, key contributors, high pressure, competitive, fast-paced environments where we're always being asked to do more with less. But take a step back to kind of archetypes and men and what we've seen and how things are role modelled to us. And I kind of touched on this earlier. I believe that my role as a father and as a husband was to work hard, to go to work, to provide for my family. That was certainly what I was role modelled from my father. It's what I saw my grandfather do. And the idea of, we cannot be what we cannot see. We are ultimately what we have observed. And through role modelling, I thought my role was to do simply that. And so that's very real for a lot of blokes, despite the fact that, gender equality and gender rebalancing is occurring and obviously very supportive. But a lot of blokes are kind of feeling very lost with that and still believe that is their role because that's all they've ever seen and trying to shift and change. It's hard.
I would say there's another element to that, being that there are a lot of men, certainly my age, and no doubt you've seen this as well, who, given some of those gender shifts that we've seen, they also want to be a provider at home, as well as being the breadwinner, which was the traditional role. And perhaps some businesses haven't caught up to the idea that the father can also be a primary caregiver. And so there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between what men may view as their role in the modern age versus what their workplace may allow them to do, or even not necessarily with their workplace policy, but perhaps from a cultural level, whether the workplace would see that as being acceptable or not. And so there seems to be a bit of a disconnect there between what men might want or need versus what society will allow them to have.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on a couple of things. There's kind of the cultural and societal aspects, right? The pressures that we place upon ourselves to fit a particular mould. Let's just call it masculinity, right? We're talking about blokes. But you're also right in saying that a lot of workplaces haven't caught up with treating men equally in terms of providing access to parental support. And parental leave programs are a really good example of that when kids are born. I see these challenges with the men that come to the charity community groups where they want to be there. This is their first experience or their second experience, and they want to be more involved as a parent, but they get 2 weeks off. And so they've got to kind of jam it all in. They've got to get back to work, and they feel the pressure to be there at work, but also to want to be at home. And there is a real disconnect between the shifts that are taking place in what it means to be a man and how it's being defined by us, for us, and or by others, and what we want, right? And that creates conflict and challenges for us as blokes to try and balance it all as the sands are shifting around us, but we're also wanting to do and be all of these things.
Absolutely. When you have the various events and activities that you run, when you speak to men on the ground about the various issues they may be facing personally and professionally, do you get the sense that things are getting worse or getting better? Are they staying much the same?
Yeah, worse, but in different ways. So if I think back to a comment that I made before about the idea of poor mental health suffering in silence because of stigma, what I am seeing now is this wave of guys losing their voice, right? Like they don't know what to say, how to say it, to say the right thing, fearful of saying the wrong thing. And a really good example is one of the guys that's in one of our communities who was re-entering the dating pool. He'd been out for a while, things have changed, there's now technology and apps, and so, he went through the process and he finally had a date and was really excited. And I saw him the next week and I said, "How'd it go?" He said it was an absolute disaster. I said, what happened? He said, "Well, I didn't know when I went to open the door for the restaurant whether I should open the door. Did she want me to open the door? Did she want to open the door? I got the feeling she was very strong and independent." And so, the date from the very beginning started to implode because of the confusion around the difference between being a good human, chivalry, and trying to provide balance and independence to his date. Now, there's a really good example of a bloke that probably overthought the scenario. But it's a real example of guys being confused about even the most basic of things that we've probably been taught and done on numerous occasions over generations. So, these shifting sands often result in silence and uncertainty. But I am encouraged by what I am seeing with guys more often coming forward. And we're just doing our latest round of surveys with our community, so I'm keen to see the outcome. But historically, 60% of the blokes that have come to the charity and community initiatives and programs have come because of the influence of a woman in their life, a mother, a sister, a wife, a colleague or a friend that has said, "You know what, you need something outside of work and you need something outside of your family unit. You need connection, you need support, and you need mates." And it's not uncommon. We get an email nearly every week to the charity which says something like this: "I've got a great job, loving wife, amazing kids, but I've got 0 friends." And that is much more common than I would have ever imagined. So some things are progressing. Guys are starting to come to us because they are experiencing life shifts and changes. They are starting to come to us because they're being referred through as a result of seeking counsellor or psychiatrist or some form of professional help and support. But they are also coming to us because they are continuing to be supported or encouraged by women.
Yeah. Tim, I've just got a few more questions for you, which we'll get to on the other side of this. Tim, when we look across the business landscape in Australia, companies all across the spectrum are making a lot more effort to ingrain optimal wellness in the workplace than they were doing 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And, there's some really positive developments there. Do you think businesses in Australia are doing enough to cater to these specific gendered questions that we're talking about, or are businesses just painting a broad brush and saying, we're going to host a yoga class at lunchtime, or here's a free voucher to go to boot camp? Do you think that there is not enough consideration for the specific gendered issues?
As a starting point, I don't think Yoga Mat Thursdays and Cupcake Fridays are enough, and that's evident because the legislation around work health safety has now changed to actually force the hand of organisations to make mental health and employee well-being, psychosocial safety, so the way they think, the way they feel and behave, not just their physical safety, a priority for the organisation. And that's creating some real shifts within organisations around how they approach mental health and well-being. To your question around the gendered nature, one of the benefits I had in working in larger organisations was able to get involved in the development of employee wellbeing programs. And when surveying the employees, what they told us was they wanted something that was unique to them. Don't just roll out Yoga Thursdays and expect that it's going to suit everybody. Breathing is not something that everybody, well, it's something everybody needs to do, but it's not a breathwork session. It's not somebody that everyone wants to spend their Wednesday lunchtimes. Pilates doesn't suit everybody. Meditation doesn't suit everybody. We have to find a balance for what people want and need. But at the core of that, and to avoid trying to do too many things and meet the needs of like a very diverse range of needs, because people define and need different things out of wellbeing, is the need to actually drive a much more significant change in our approach to cultural health and wellbeing around the issue of mental health. And so, it starts with opening up conversations, normalising them around mental health, helping to cut back and reduce the negative stigma around mental health, especially in the workplace. And that comes with time, it comes with education, after that you need to build skills, confidence and knowledge.
Yeah. For business leaders and HR professionals listening to this conversation, what kind of questions do they need to ask of themselves in order to better cater to men's mental health in the workplace?
Can you do it? Are you capable? Do you have the right motivations and drive? Are you supported by your organisation? And this is a real challenge for leaders, right? I think leading well consistently over a long period of time is one of the greatest challenges I've actually ever faced. And if you think about the typical structure, you've got psychosocial safety being placed upon the shoulders of the leaders, despite it being the organisation's responsibility, and they are already stacked with a pretty heavy to-do list. So as leaders, I suppose you've got a couple of choices, right? We talked about the benefits of role modelling, the role that plays in terms of driving culture. So you either lead by example, and what that does is showcase how, but it also creates an environment of permission. So yeah, you can get up and go to Pilates at lunchtime because my boss is doing it, which makes it okay. And that's a real thing, right? This idea of permission. So lead by example, get on the front foot, one option. The second is that you empower your people and drive better education, engagement, awareness and support, and think about that as being a safety net from bottom up. Takes a little bit of the heavy lifting off the leaders, but it also means that you can spread it much wider across the business. Or you lead by example and lift the base and change the culture holistically.
What's your level of optimism that we can improve men's mental health, not just in the workplace, but then more broadly across society?
I think it's happening, right? We still have some major challenges to face around historical masculine approaches to being tough, strong and stoic. The idea of opening up and treating vulnerability as a strength, to encourage blokes to just talk, to seek help, because we know that's the greatest challenge to overcome, to help prevent mental health illness disorders and in particular suicide. More broadly, it doesn't mean that we have to redesign the entire system.
Yeah.
Should we cater for? Should we think about? Yeah, absolutely. Same way with men that we should with women and anybody else where circumstances might be unique. I think there's an opportunity for businesses to put some broad brush measures in place, and that's going to appeal to everybody, and you can't please everybody all the time. So test and learn.
Yeah. And tell me about some of the work that you're doing, not just with businesses, but more broadly to change the situation.
Yeah, so from a charity point of view, we run a whole series of community-based programs, initiatives and activities designed to get blokes outdoors, moving, connecting, forming new social and support networks with other blokes in their local community. The idea there being that they always have somewhere to go, something to do, someone to talk to and support when they need it. And that is fundamentally about prevention, to catch before they fall, or to have that safety net to be able to tap into those resources when they need them. And we've seen our programs save lives. Outside of that, I'm working with workplaces through Betterment Consulting to help better educate, to help change culture, to encourage leaders to dig into some of those more challenging conversations, to give them the skills, the tools, the knowledge and the frameworks to be able to do that confidently. And in most cases, there's a lot of work to be done around mental health education. It's invisible, right? Yeah. So we have to make it something that we can talk about and see. Yeah.
And for those listening who want to learn more about the work that you're doing, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, certainly jump online and look at mongrelsmen.com. Follow us on socials. If you want to have a chat to me about how I can help workplaces, it's Betterment Consulting, or reach out to me, Tim Hewson, on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Tim, just finally, before I let you go, what final words of wisdom would you offer to men listening to this episode as to how best they can, I guess, take that first step to address some of the issues that they're facing, or even help those around them? What do they need to do?
Yeah, maybe three things, if I can. The first is to be kind to yourself, right? Starting with self-care is obviously the best place, regardless of whether or not you are experiencing mental health challenges or you're a leader. The idea of looking after yourself so that you can help support yourself and others. And we are our own worst critics. We are so hard on ourselves. So be good to yourself. The second is to reach out to those that you think might be struggling. If you see something that doesn't quite feel right, take the opportunity. And that might mean walking shoulder to shoulder, getting out of the office, going for a coffee. It's certainly not going to happen in a meeting, but taking that opportunity. And the worst thing that can happen is that you feel a little bit uncomfortable about having that conversation, but it's likely to be far less challenging than whatever they're experiencing. And the third thing would be to take some action, like go through your phone after you've listened to this podcast. Find somebody in there that you haven't spoken to for a while that you might be worried about, that you haven't seen, and reach out to them. And if you're not comfortable having a call, send them a text, and I think you'll be surprised what you might get back.
Yeah. Tim Hewson, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to the listener for tuning in. If you found this conversation distressing at all, we will have links to resources in the episode show notes. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and review on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, as it'll help other professionals discover and enjoy this show. And if you've got ideas for other episodes we can run, please get in touch at editor@hrleader.com.au. You can also reach us on social media. See you again next time.